Hi again, everybody. Here's an interesting little game that was played in New York in 1934 with Pincus with the white pieces and Königsberg with the black, and it's a Ruy Lopez. And it starts out e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and now black plays a6. White retreats the bishop to a4. Now black brings out his bishop to e7. White goes ahead and castles. Black now plays the d pawn to d6. White plays the c pawn to c3. Black now plays b5, hitting at the bishop, so white retreats the bishop back to c2. Now black brings out the bishop to g4, and white moves the queen up to e2. Black brings out his knight to f6, and now white plays his a-pawn up to a4, and black decides to just move his b-pawn to b4. So white moves the a-pawn up to a5. Black now castles, and white now plays the bishop from c2 back to a4, hitting at the knight at c6. So black just retreats his bishop from g4 back to d7. White now strikes out in the center by playing the d-pawn up to d4, but black first goes ahead and captures the c-pawn with his b-pawn, and white recaptures with his b-pawn. Now black takes the d-pawn off with his e-pawn, and white recaptures with the c-pawn. Now black plays his d-pawn to d5, hitting at the e-pawn for a second time, so white just brings up his knight to c3 and defends it again. And black goes ahead and takes off the e-pawn, and white recaptures with the knight. And now black just swings his rook over from f8 to e8, obviously wanting it to be on an open file if the pieces ever get out of the way. And white takes the knight at e4 and moves it up to g5. And so black just plays his h-pawn up to h6 and hits at it. Which now brings us to the challenge to the viewer. If you'd like to pause the video now and see if you can find white's next move, I'll wait for you. Well, instead of retreating the knight at g5, white plays knight takes f7. And black decides to accept the sacrifice, and he captures it with his king. And now white takes the bishop at a4 and just drops it back to b3 with check. And black now has several alternatives, but they're all bad. For instance, obviously he can't just block by taking the bishop from d7 and moving it to e6, because obviously white would just play queen takes e6 with check. So, and the other way is that if black just retreated his king back to f8, because then white would simply take his queen and move it to c4, obviously threatening to checkmate at f7. And the only way black can stop checkmate is to give away a tremendous amount of material, and the game would be over anyway. For instance, he would have to first block with the bishop at e6, and after white took the bishop with his queen, then black would have to just block with his own queen at d5. And if white then took the queen with his bishop, then black would capture the bishop with his knight, and then white could take either one of the knights, in other words, say the one at d5, and he's so ahead in material now it doesn't really matter. Or black has a third alternative, and this is the one he actually chooses. he decides to move his king to g6. And that leads to an interesting, nice little checkmate. First, white plays his knight at f3 to h4 with check, and black only has one move. He has to play the king back to h7. And now white plays his queen up to d3 with check. And then I guess black just wanted to prolong the agony for one extra move, so he decides to make a pointless block, and he moves his bishop to f5. And white, of course, takes the bishop with check. And once again, the king only has one move. Well, he could move the g-pawn up to block, but instead he decides to just move his king back into the corner. And that's when white plays the knight to g6, check. And now black again only has one move. He has to move the king right back to h7. And now white plays the knight to f8 with a double check. And once again, the king just has to go right back into the corner. And now white plays the queen to h7, check. And all black can do is capture with his knight, and white finishes him off with knight to g6, checkmate. Nice little interesting combination there at the end to get checkmate. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the game, and I'll see you next time.